Hello, this is Wayne Ford. I'm a registered forester and also an adjunct instructor at the University of Alabama. And I teach a wildlife course and a forestry course and a dendrology course. So people say, what is dendrology? Well, that's the study of the classification of trees. But today we are at Moundville Archaeological Park, a beautiful park right here in Moundville, Alabama, not far from Tuscaloosa. And a lot of the things that I do as an instructor at the University of Alabama, I take a lot of my students out here to look at these plants. So today we're going to go take a little virtual tour around Moundville Archaeological Park and see what type of trees we have around here. One of the first trees we're going to talk about today at the park is this tree right here. This is a white oak. The scientific name is a Quercus alba. It's in the white oak family. It has rounded lobes, generally 7 to 9 lobes on the plant. The backside, the abaxal side, is a whitish gray color, which gives another reason for being a Quercus alba. Alba means white. You have also a small acorn right here. The fruit of a white oak tree, they generally produce acorns about every year. The red oak species generally produce acorns every 2 years. The white oak is probably one of the most versatile trees we have, not only for humans, and I'm sure years ago the Native Americans used the white oak. The acorns are sweet, whereas red oaks are bitter. They contain tannic acid. But the white oak acorns are sweet. That's the reason that wildlife, particularly around the Moundville area, the white-tailed deer, eastern wild turkeys, they love these acorns because they're quite tasty. They're not bitter. Another neat thing about the white oak tree is the bark. The bark of the tree has white, flaky bark, which gives it away too. So there's a lot of good purposes for white oaks. They make good flooring. A lot of people, when they make fine drinks, they make big containers. They're made out of white oak wood because the white oak has tylosis in it, and it prevents moisture from coming through. So a lot of these people use white oak to make these big round vats and barrels for different types of things because it has tylosis and it prevents the moisture from coming through, whereas the red oak is a ring porous wood and moisture will go through, so they go with white oak. But white oak is the first one we're going to see today. Beautiful plant. It's a deciduous tree. It has alternate leaf arrangement. In other words, there's one leaf per node, and deciduous means they lose their leaves in the fall. But it's probably one of the most used wildlife plants we have in the South. But white oak, Quercus alba. Our next tree we're going to touch base on is this one right here, an eastern red cedar. It's different than that Quercus alba or the white oak a while ago. It was deciduous. This one right here is evergreen. It's also a conifer. In other words, the fruit is a cone. It's a gymnosperm, which is different than the white oak, which is an angiosperm. They had a lot of different types of fruit. But generally for your conifers or your gymnosperms, most all of them have conifers except maybe one, like a ginkgo. But on this one right here, this is in the Cupressaceae family. But if you look at the scale-like leaves right here, they're pressed right next to the stem. That's where it gets the name Cupressaceae. They also have fruit, which a lot of people think they're blueberries, but they're actually cones. This is an excellent tree as far as that's concerned, particularly for wildlife, particularly for winter cover, because these are evergreen. They stay on year-round. But this is a great tree to have around the home, particularly for wildlife. And we'll look at the bark next. The bark of the eastern red cedar is also quite unique. If you look at the bark right here, it's shreddy. It's got shreds all the way up and down the tree. This is an excellent wood, and I'm sure years ago, the Native Americans used this tree particularly to start fires. The cedar has excellent ability to start fires, even with the little small flecks right here, but also the wood. It starts fires very easily. Also, the eastern red cedar also contains chemicals that actually prevent moss. So a lot of people like to go into their closets and maybe line their closets with cedar, eastern red cedar, because it prevents moss. And a lot of people like to make their hope chest. In other words, when they get married, they like to go ahead and put what we call a cedar chest. And they might put their dresses or their tuxedos in there because moss will not touch them. But they also make great fence posts. And I'm sure probably if the Native Americans were building homes, they probably used this as one of the main trees to use as a foundation to hold their huts up. But because the wood just does not deteriorate. It lasts for years and years, particularly the heartwood or the great growth center of the tree. But this is Eastern red cedar. You can identify this tree not only by the leaves and the fruit, the little blue cones, but also by the shreddy bark. All right, now we're in front of the Jones Archaeological Museum here at Moundville Archaeological Park. And we're going to look at some trees right around the park here in the museum. One of the most beautiful trees right here is this one right here. This is an evergreen tree. This is called a sweet bay. It's in the Magnoliaceae family. It has real pretty white flowers. They actually turn into red berries, which is a good one right here, the berries. Eventually the berries fall off and they turn into a follicle. And eventually, this one right here is beginning to come out just a little bit, but they'll turn into a little small follicle. The neat thing about these leaves, the back side of the leaves is silver. And that sort of gives them away as a sweet bay. And years ago, I'm sure these were probably right here at Moundville when the Native Americans were here. You can also sort of crush the leaf. Smells good, smells like a bay. Matter of fact, a lot of people from a lot of cultures use this to put in jambalaya, different types of things too, to cook with. But this is a sweet bay. It's in the Magnoliaceae family, Magnolia virginiana. And it is evergreen. It's unusual because it is a broadleaf tree and they're generally deciduous. But this broadleaf tree is evergreen. In other words, it retains its leaves year round. But many people call this a sweet bay magnolia, Magnolia virginiana, in the Magnoliaceae family. All right, we're right here on Mound P at Moundville Archaeological Park. We're right on top of this mound. It's right behind the museum here. You can just visualize at one time this was a huge city 800 years ago. Things have changed a little bit since then. But this was a thriving place years ago when the Native Americans were here at first. But if you view right over here to the water area, you can see some trees out in the water. And you see some trees right to the right. We're going to determine what those trees are in just a second. This particular tree that we're looking at right now, right next to the museum, is a bald cypress tree. It is a conifer. In other words, the fruit will be cones. They're a little round, globular fruit, and generally they're relatively sticky, but they will disintegrate when they mature. But the bald cypress is in actually the Cupressaceae family, called Taxodium distichum. Again, the leaves look very similar to a feather. Look very similar to a feather, sort of broad-leaved. The wood can be used, it'll last for years and years. I used to cruise timber in Florida. A lot of bald cypress trees are out there. Huge trunks. They also have knees that come up out of the water. We have some knees here at the park we can show you in just a few minutes. But this particular tree has been here a long time. They can live in the water. They can also live outside of water. But on this particular tree, the leaves are probably more reciprocal of these right here, sort of broadleaf. This is unusual. It is a conifer, but it is a deciduous conifer. In other words, it loses its leaves in the fall. But this is a bald cypress, very akin to its another one called a pond cypress. But bald cypress, this has been here many times. The native Indians, when they'd get big enough, they would actually make boats out of these, little small canoes, because these float real well too. But bald cypress, Taxodium species. The next tree we're going to look at actually is this one right here. It's called the Eastern cottonwood. The scientific name is Populus deltoidus. This is the leaf of an eastern cottonwood. They have a deltoid shape. They're triangular shaped. And also the neat thing about the leaf of this tree, it has a flat petiole. So if you get any amount of wind, it's just going to be sort of flake in the wind. It's going to go like this right here because it has a flat petioles. It's in the same family as a populus tremulus, which is a quaking aspen out west. But it's in the Salicaceae family. It grows fast, really pretty venation. Even the backside has pretty veins on it. Unfortunately, we can't get a green leaf. It's right on top of the water. They do like water, as you can see. But this is your Populus deltoides, an eastern cottonwood. The next tree we're going to look at also is right to the right of the museum here at Moundville, is actually a black willow. It's called Salix nigra. It's right in the water. They like water too, just like your eastern cottonwood, just like your ball cypress. So a lot of these are very receptacle of their habitat of where they grow. But the black willow is also a good species. It's also in the Salicaceae family, just like your eastern cottonwood. That's one reason I wanted to get these two together. They're both in the Salicaceae family. In other words, they have capsules as fruit. And when those capsules open up, little small, it was like cotton comes out of them with the seeds. So it looks like almost it's snowing when they do come out. But one of the things the Native Americans used on these black willow trees, they used the bark for aspirin. So they did have headaches, I'm sure, just like we do. But they used the Salix nigra bark acts as aspirin. Even nowadays, a lot of people use the Salix nigra bark or the black willow bark for aspirin. But the black willow leaf is long and narrow. It can be 2 to 3 inches long, maybe 1/4 of an inch wide. They also have small serrated teeth on the outer edge of them. When the bark gets older, it's very ruffled and has a lot of grooves and real flaky, almost like a white oak. But anyway, this is your black willow, your Salix nigra, in the Salicaceae family. The next tree we're going to cover here at the park today is actually a water oak, or Quercus nigra. It's right in front of the Jones Archaeological Museum here today. But the water oak is a paddle-shaped leaf, almost like a spatula-shaped leaf. It's a very unique tree in that it has smooth bark, it's alternate leaf arrangement, and it's deciduous. It loses its leaves in the fall. A lot of times the leaf might look very similar to this one, even more of a spatula shape or paddle shape. But many times the Native Americans use these trees particularly for firewood and also for building purposes. So that's another good thing that they use on these trees. Also, we were talking a while ago about the white oak. This is the water oak. It's in the red oak family. But they also use the bark and use them many times to make baskets out of and rope out of. But this is the Quercus nigra. They have a very small acorn, which makes it fairly edible for any type of wild game. But it is in the red oak family. It does contain tannic acid, so it is sort of bitter. But this is your white oak, spatula-shaped leaf, Quercus nigra. It's in the family called Fagaceae. This particular tree also is right in front of the museum here at Moundville Archaeological Park. This is called a willow oak. A willow oak will be very thin and narrow, very thin leaf. This is an older leaf because the leaves are tall, they can't reach in just right off the bat, but they can get up to about 1 to 3 inches long. All shaped, very thin, and comes up to a little small point. This is actually in the Fagaceae family. The scientific name is Quercus fellis. It has a very small seed or acorn on it also, which makes it a pretty good animal, a pretty good seed for about any type of animal, particularly turkey and white-tailed deer. Squirrels really like them too. But again, this is in the red oak family. The red oaks have bristle points on them like this one does right here. White oaks, like what the one we had a smooth rounded lobes. But this is a willow oak, Quercus fellis. Okay. Right now we're at the walkway fixing to head up to the Indian village in just a second. There are several different types of species right here we'd like to cover. This is one that's very unique. This is called the winged elm. The winged elm is alternate leaf, it's deciduous, it has serrated teeth, and one thing that gives it away, it has corky wings. If you look closer here on the bark, you can see some corky wings right here. There are 2 tree species we have here at the park. Many times they'll have corky wings, your winged elm, and also the sweet gum. But our winged elm, this is in the Ulmaceae family, and the scientific name is actually Ulmus alata. But this is a hard type of wood, but many times they would get this type of wood and make bowls and different types of wood things out of it. But winged elm. The next tree we're going to pick up here at the park is this one right here. It's a Carolina laurel cherry. The Carolina laurel cherry has alternate leaf arrangement. This is a broadleaf plant, but it is a evergreen broadleaf plant, an evergreen broadleaf. The neat thing about this is actually in the Rosaceae family. We're going to see another in the Rosaceae family in just a second. But this is bright green, sort of shiny on the outside, on the front side, and the back side, the abaxal side, is sort of more of a yellowish tinge. And to make sure you have a Carolina laurel cherry, all you got to do is get the leaf, crinkle it up, blow on it, smells just like a cherry. Carolina laurel cherry. Actually, it's Prunus caroliniana in the Rosaceae family. The next tree we're going to cover this morning is this one. It is also in the Rosaceae family, just like the Carolina laurel cherry. This is actually a black cherry. The black cherry is very similar to the Carolina laurel cherry. It has alternate leaf arrangements and one leaf per node. They're broadleaf, but they're deciduous. They lose their leaves in the fall. Another neat thing about this particular tree, the back side of the leaf is more of a yellowish white tinge. Many times on the very back side, on the abaxal side, you'll see some little yellow surf right on the very back of it. They also have real small serrated teeth on the outer edge of a black cherry. So that'll sort of give it away. You see these little spots on them. These are called lenticels, and we're going to see a picture of the bark in just a second. But on these lenticels, you can also get a twig and scratch it and smell it. Woo! Smells very bitter. It's very bitter. This is one of the trees, like a sourwood. It has a sort of a disagreeable fragrance to me. Some people might like it. But this is your black cherry. Another thing to look for a black cherry, particularly on young bark, is this bark. You have these stripes around them. They're called lenticels. That's actually the exchange of oxygen in air and out of the bark of the tree. But this is another key, particularly on our young black cherries, are the lenticels. When they get older, the bark will actually get rougher. It looks sort of like burnt cornflakes. But this is your black cherry. Scientific name is Prunus serratina. And it is also in the Rosaceae family, just like the one we just saw, our Carolina laurel cherry. This next plant I'm going to show you is actually a woody plant, but it's a vine. As you see, I'm not touching it. It's called poison ivy. Poison ivy has 1, 2, 3 leaflets. Actually, it's in the Anacardiaceae family. It can really cause people to break out, so you want to be very careful. They will be climbing up trees and they'll come out at right angles. Here's some more poison ivy right here. Toxicotendron radicans. So toxi means toxic, and it can be very toxic. Radicans also means just like a radical, it can be very toxic too. But this is poison ivy, Toxicodendron radicans. It's one you want to stay away from. A lot of people break out on this one. It's not a good one to have around your home. But poison ivy, 3 leaflets, and it's on a vine. But anyway, Toxicodendron radicans, stay away from this, poison ivy. This particular plant, we're on the little wooden walkway right here at the park. This is actually a redbud. This is one, you can count the veins on it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 veins. Right where the petiole touches the plant, it actually it's swollen right there, which makes it unique. But the redbud is a type of a tree. It buds early in the spring. It should have been called a lavender or pink bud because the flowers are pink. But the leaf is shaped like a heart. So one thing that probably Native Americans may have done years ago if they had spray paint, you could get these, flatten them out, and then spray them a cherry red color and give it to your girlfriend or boyfriend and tell them you went to a major department store and bought it just for them, and it didn't really cost you a penny. But this actually is a redbud, Acerus canadensis. It's in the Fagaceae family. the Fabaceae family. The Fabaceae family, they have as their fruit is legumes or bean-like pods. But a beautiful little plant, beautiful specimen plant. It's just a regular redbud and it's shaped like a heart. Another plant that the American Indians really enjoyed was the hickory nut tree. This is a hickory nut tree. There are several different types of hickory nuts. There's a multi-nut hickory. We have actually a shagbark hickory. We have a pignut hickory. This actually is a bitternut hickory. A bitternut hickory has a valvate yellow bud, and they generally have 7 to 9 leaflets. This is called a compound leaf. But a lot of times they would get the wood or the bark off your hickory trees, and that's where they do a lot of their basket weaving off of the wood. Also, it made great firewood. So, and if they was able to bag a venison or an animal, wild game, this excellent wood to work with because it smokes it real good. It makes it even more flavorful. A lot of hoe handles are made out of hickory wood. So I'm sure too that the Native Americans, when they worked on their gardening, they would get wood from a hickory tree, a limb, and get some type of area to use as a little hoe, and they work it to hoe with. But this is a bitternut hickory. Actually, it's in the Juglanaceae family, just like a Juglans nigra, just like a black walnut. But this actually is Carya cordiformis. But this is a bitternut hickory. All right, we're out here at the Indian huts now and enjoying them a little bit. And there's another plant right beside these Indian huts that's shaped like a star. This is called a sweet gum. Actually, it's a pretty neat little type of a plant. It's shaped just like a star. They have 5 lobes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The scientific name is Liquidambar styrosiflua. It's in the Altengiaceae family. The fruit is a gumball. It has a very spiny fruit, and I don't know what animal might eat the gumball. Maybe a porcupine or something, but not many people eat the fruit. But a lot of times the people would use this to actually to put their huts up with, particularly the limbs, because they had a lot of sweet gums. But it's a beautiful plant, just shaped like a star. A lot of times they will also have corky wings on them. All of them don't have corky wings, but many of them do. But again, this is a sweet gum, Liquidambar styrosiflua, in the Altengiaceae family. The next plant we want to share with you today is this one right here, the Osage orange. It has a lot of different names. Some people call it bodock. Some call it oxwood. A lot of different names. Some people call it bowwood. But this is actually an Osage orange. It's Maclura pomifera. It's in the Moraceae family. The leaves are shaped sort of like a pear shape, long point, shiny above, the underside a little bit paler green. But they also can have thorns on this particular tree. And since it is in the Moraceae family, it has milky sap. Let's see if we can see any milky sap on the twig here. See this milky sap right there? That's actually latex. And it's about all the Moraceae family, just like our red mulberry. There's some red mulberry here at the park. But they have this little white milky sap in it called latex. Now, the unique thing about this particular tree right here, the Native Americans this makes excellent tree for bows and arrows. So a lot of the Native Americans would actually, see if we can get up closer to the bark right here. The bark is very unique. You have an orangish type bark, very hard wood. This also makes exits for fence posts. They also could use this very good to make their huts with. But the main thing they prized this for was to make bows and arrows. When they'd go out there hunting wild game, or even when they would have wars against one another. This was a tree that they really liked to use on this Osage orange, Maclura pomifera. And how did it get the name Maclura pomifera? You look at the fruit. This is the fruit. This is a palm. It's very hard, it's very heavy. You don't have a real big use for this fruit. I don't know of really anything that really eat it. I have heard people say that you can put it in your home, cut it open, And this is just called an Osage orange fruit or a palm. There's a lot of seeds in there since it is a palm. But a lot of people say it would deter insects, but I put it in my house and actually it helped me draw in insects. But this is the fruit, and they look like a large brain or something. Very heavy. You would not want to camp out underneath one of these trees when the fruit is falling, because you're liable to get a headache. But anyway, beautiful plant. This is right out here where the Indian Villages is, between this and the conference room. This is your Osage orange, Maclura pomifera, in the Moraceae family. Our next plant we're going to talk about is actually the pecan. Cara illinoinensis. It's in the Juglandaceae family. Quite unique, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 to 14 to 15 leaflets. One thing about a pecan tree, the leaves are pretty unique. Instead of straight, they have a fold in them. They're sort of bent over. And that sort of gives away on a pecan tree. Another thing that gives away on a pecan tree is the fruit. Here's your pecans. Now, this is the husk they're in. Now, the husk will fall off, and they have little brownish black pecans that you've all seen. This was an excellent fruit for the Native Americans. The fruit was delicious. Of course, animals, wildlife loved to eat them, and of course, humans did too. So I'm sure that the Native Americans really enjoyed this particular tree, particularly with the fruit. The bark also, if we can see, we got at the picture of the bark over there, sort of a flaky bark. Generally, it sort of actually starts branching out earlier than a lot of your other trees as a rule. But a lot of times there are a lot of sap suckers in that. But the pecan is an excellent plant, excellent for burning. If you want to build fires or barbecuing, the wood on this one, just like a hickory, you can't beat it. It does really good. And I'm sure the Native Americans used this particular wood of pecan when they would roast a deer or something, or fish. They were big fish eaters. And we're going to find out next why they were such a big fish eater. We mentioned a few minutes ago about the Native Americans enjoyed fish. Why did they like fish? First of all, it gave them excellent sustenance to eat. Also, if you look right behind me here, you have the Black Warrior River. The Black Warrior River goes all the way from Tuscaloosa, further north of Tuscaloosa, all the way down to the Bay of Port of Mobile. But the American Indians, this also was a good travel place. They would get in their canoes, many times out of river birch bark canoes, and go up and down here and trade and fish. A lot of fishing, a lot of crawfish too, but primarily fish. So that was a big thing on the diet, was the fish. But by having the Black Warrior River to navigate from place to place, that's how many of the different tribes could meet one another, have the ceremonial services, and use this actually as a place for navigation. So actually we're right here, right next to the conference center, and we're going to look at about a few more trees right here. But if you just look right here, this is such a beautiful sight. You can just visualize years ago, over 800 years ago plus, the Native Americans in their canoes out there fishing, maybe selling fish, getting enough food for their family to eat, and then going up here and getting a pecan limb or hickory limb, making them a big fire and enjoying that. They also use the fires at night for light. So that's another thing. Back in those days, they didn't have what we have now. They didn't have electricity. So if they needed night lights, they had to have them a fire and start them a fire. Let's move over to this tree right here, right next to the Black Warrior River. A beautiful plant right here. This is called an ash. And ash, if you look right here, we have white ashes and we have green ashes. But the ash, if you look right here, it has opposite leaf arrangement. In other words, 2 leaves at 1 node. Also on the ash tree, this is another compound leaf. This has 2, 4, 6, 7 leaflets, can have 9 leaflets. Many times we have the white ash. This is the fruit of your ash tree. It's called a samara. These are called samaras. Another neat thing about an ash, if you look at the back of the petiole or the rachis right here, it's bent. It's one of the few petioles that you have that will be bent. Plus it has opposite leaf arrangement. The fruit also is called a samara. These are called peduncles, the very tip of this from right here to right here, the peduncle. This would be actually a white ash, which is actually a Fraxinus americana. Green ash is Fraxinus pennsylvanica. And the neat thing about this, what does this look like right here? It looks a little bit like a flat baseball bat or a bowling pin. Now, when Freddie Freeman or Hank Aaron or Babe Ruth, when they'd hit home runs, what were their bats made out of? Ash. Baseball bats are made out of ash wood. So that makes it quite unique. So I'm sure too, the Native Americans would use ash to play stickball with and other types of things because it can take a lot of shock. But this is your ash, Fraxinus americana, and it's one on our list that has opposite leaf arrangement. These leaves also are deciduous. They lose their leaves in the fall. But the neat thing about them is the fruit, which is called a samara, and they're used to make baseball bats. Another unique feature about your ash tree is the bark. The bark, if you look at it, is fairly soft, almost like a cork. Like if you're fishing with a cork, it's generally soft bark, like a cork. So that can sort of give it away too, because you can just get your fingernail many times and bend right in on the bark of the tree, and that would be an ash. But this is your typical ash, Fraxinus americana. Another plant that the Native Americans really enjoyed was this one right here. This is a vine, a woody vine. This is a muscadine. It's actually in the Vitaceae family, but they would have fruit, little small round muscadines, quite tasty. Matter of fact, Vitis rotundifolia is a scientific name because it has fruit on it and they're round. Rotunda means round, so Vitis rotundifolia. But a muscadine was a plant that the Native Americans really enjoyed, or the fruit, and also animals like it. Any type of wild game really enjoys the fruit of a muscadine. We're going to end today on this particular plant because this was a very useful plant for the Native Americans. This actually is called a common persimmon. The common persimmon has a leaf, it's entire, it's smooth, it's alternate, and it's deciduous. Very small purplish buds. Has a very wide midrib on this inside, on the front. The back side, it looks like, if you look at it real close with a magnifying glass, it looks like little small moon craters on it, which sort of gives it away. Another thing that is unique with your common persimmon is they generally have tar spots on them, the little small tar spots right here. That sort of gives them away. And then of course another thing that the Native Americans really enjoyed as well as animals with the fruit right here. This is called a common persimmon. Now, the common persimmon has a little small cap on it. Let's see if I can miss it. A small cap on it. Now, when they're green, they're not good at all. They'll make your whole face swivel up. But when a frost hits them, they're actually quite tasty. So this was a treat for many of the boys and girls and even adults of the Native Americans, this common persimmon. The bark took a lot of shock. First of all, the bark is very neat. It looks like alligator bark, sort of square barked. Look just like an alligator skin. But that's your common persimmon. They're very unique. You can get a knife and go up and down one of those blocks and it looks like fish scales. It'd be sort of gray, brown, gray, and brown. But a lot of people who make golf club heads make it out of common persimmon wood. They can take a lot of shock, so like an ash can with a baseball bat. But these were used a lot, and actually this was another tree that was used a lot by stickball for the Native Indians, particularly the children. It did a very good job on your just common persimmon. Diospyros virginiana. The family name is Ebonacea. How it gets its name Ebonacea, the wood is very dark, like ebony. But anyway, this is your common persimmon. But this about ends our tour right now here at Moundville Archaeological Park. My name is Wayne Ford. I'm actually an adjunct instructor here at the University of Alabama and a registered forester. Hope you've enjoyed this virtual hike through Moundville Archaeological Park. It's been fun for me. And if you haven't been to the park, be sure to come down here and start from right with the Welcome Center, come all the way back down here to the Black Warrior River. You can't beat it.